Hey guys, this is Austin. Chrome OS. Ever since the first developer model came out back in 2011, which I got to take a little sneak peek at, the simplicity and the actual design was absolutely there. I mean, who needs all the legacy bloat of Windows and Mac OS when there's a cleaner, more wholesome option? It's hard to argue with in theory. You've got a clean build of Linux with just the Chrome browser on top, and realistically, you can get a lot of what you need done inside of Chrome, especially considering that most of these Chromebooks have very low-end specs. We're talking Intel Celeron processors or Rockchip processors. I mean, you don't need a lot of power to simply just run a web browser. And then there's the idea of having a more lockdown system can actually be a real benefit. I mean, sure, you probably know that you shouldn't really go visit sketchysite.org, but there are tons and tons of Chromebooks in schools where kids might not necessarily have that same level of forethought and thinking behind not opening every attachment and downloading every weird emoji pack that you can see. Stay safe. And think about it, back in 2011, while it might have been a little bit of a struggle to do everything inside a web browser, these days I would argue it's actually a lot simpler. I mean, I know personally I spend a ton of time inside the browser every day with fairly intense web apps. So things like Spotify, Google Docs, Gmail, all these things run just fine on Chrome OS, and arguably that's sort of the main selling point. If you don't need all the extra cruft of a Windows-based PC, then Chrome really is simple, clean, and elegant. It's the vegan option of PCs. Not vegan, plant-based diet. I welcome all people on this channel to eat whatever they'd like.
California has changed you.
You got me there. But the question is, can you actually live with Chrome OS? Well, ever since that first CR48, I've used Chromebooks on and off. In fact, I actually started working on this video last year with this ASUS Chromebook. However, I didn't really actually finish the video. But today, with the brand new Pixelbook Go coming out, I feel like it's a perfect time to answer, is Chrome OS enough, or should you just stick with your Windows and your Mac and your full Linux and your Android and iPad OS and iOS and Windows Mobile? Let's start with the Pixelbook Go itself. Unlike a lot of cheapy Chromebooks, which, well, might have okay specs but pretty poor build quality, this feels nice and sturdy. It's still super thin, it's still incredibly lightweight, but the important thing here is that in the hand, it feels like a solid piece of laptop hardware. I feel pretty confident in this lasting quite a while. It's made out of a finely painted magnesium, which is one of the things that helps it to be not only lightweight, but also it feels really nice. So it's got this sort of grippy finish, and as far as when you're looking for matte black things, this gets the MKBHD seal of approval. Well, actually it doesn't. I don't know. It might not.
Did you actually get that?
I didn't know. I'm just assuming. But I'm sure it's fine.
Also, talk about the bottom.
Okay, the bottom. All right, so one of the interesting things here is that it's got this sort of washboard texture. Now, I actually do personally like it, especially with this sort of more grippy texture, especially when you're sitting at a couch or something. It actually stays really nice. But honestly, my favorite part about it is that it makes this not generic, because a lot of this laptop design is plain. It's simple. This gives it a little bit of character, and I don't have to go the was it just pink, slightly pink, a lot pink? What's the name of the pink color? Very pink?
Not pink? That's the
Not pink, you're right. It's not, I think it's not pink. We have the internet. The not pink. If you're interested in the not pink Pixelbook Go, it's not available yet. You're also getting an excellent keyboard with great travel, and honestly, it's actually one of the quietest laptop keyboards I've ever used. And around on the side, you actually get a pretty solid selection of ports for a Chromebook. A pair of USB-C ports, which can not only handle power, but they also can do data, as well as each can handle a 4K display, which I tested, and it actually works. Not that lots of people with Chromebooks are probably using multiple 4K displays. Is that a little unrealistic of a use case? It works.
Maybe at least one, a TV.
Yeah? No, it is certainly not perfect. The specs are, shall we say, not exactly blisteringly fast. Now, I have the base model here, which comes with a dual-core Core M3 processor, 8 gigs of RAM, as well as 64 gigs of storage. And considering that we're just, web browsing, it's fine. But at $650, you're definitely paying a lot for this design, and you're not spending a lot of money on the actual spec inside. The screen is also fine. It's a 1080p 13-inch touchscreen, and while the brightness and the viewing angles are fine, the bezels are a little bit thick on this guy, and something I really missed from the original Pixelbook is the ability to actually use a full 2-in-1 design. Honestly, my biggest problem with this hardware is just the price. At $650 for the base model, that's a lot of money for a Chromebook. And this thing gets incredibly expensive as you start to add upgrades like a Core i5, more storage, there's a 4K display option, which is like $1,400. Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Wait, it costs
$1,400.
$1,400?
Okay, no. The entire laptop costs $1,400 when you upgrade, but it's very expensive. The thing is, though, is that there are other Chromebooks on the market which have very similar specs for far less money. Take this $650 option and compare it to this Asus Chromebook, which only costs a little less than $400 for the same Core M3, same memory, same storage, slightly bigger screen. It's kind of hard to justify. Don't get me wrong, this is one of the nicest bits of Chrome OS hardware that you could possibly get, but the real issue here isn't so much the hardware as the software. It's $650 plus, you're well into the category of some pretty nice Windows laptops, which really sort of brings me to the main point of this video. While the hardware might be here, is Chrome OS really ready to replace your Windows or Mac?
It's kind of complicated, and it depends on your use case. But I'm gonna explain that, not just whisper it to you.
The easy answer is, a lot of people absolutely can use a Chromebook every day, especially if you have one with decent specs like the Pixelbook. Now, in addition to the fairly wide range of web apps out there, you also do have access to most Android apps using the Play Store. Now, I say most, some aren't compatible, but generally speaking, this goes a long way toward plugging the gaps where things like Slack, for example, or something that doesn't have necessarily a good web app, will generally have at least a passable Android version. Now, of course, these are still Android apps running on a Chromebook, which means that the quality is maybe not quite as nice as, say, a native Mac or Windows app. So the main problem is that you can see a lot of these things. For example, Twitter's a really big offender. It looks fine when you have it sort of squished to the side of the screen, but the second you go full screen with it, it looks ridiculous. And especially when it comes to things like text scaling and performance, I mean, it's fine, it's usable, but it is not as good as the native apps that you might be used to. Although, there are a few examples of apps which do run really well on Chrome OS. I know Adobe's Lightroom in particular has been designed, obviously it's based on the Android app, but there are a lot of optimizations specifically for a large screen keyboard trackpad for Chrome OS. Then you've got some other stuff which is nice. So there's a full file browser, and there's even a fairly rudimentary version of Linux that you can install, which, while not full blown or anything, is definitely a nice little feature. I mean, Chrome OS has grown up, and it's grown up in a pretty big way. And yet, at the end of the day, these are sort of features that have been tacked on to the main focus, which of course is the Chrome browser. A lot of things that aren't going to work inside Chrome are going to only be sort of passable outside of it, if not a straight up deal breaker for some people. It very much depends on who you are and what you expect out of a computer. Sometimes though, there are just no ways around the limitations of a Chrome OS device. Now sure, if you can do a lot of basic tasks on a Chromebook, more power to you, but I think the issue here is that a lot of people can do a lot of this stuff on mobile devices, such as phones and tablets. Really, when you come to a PC, a lot of times that's because you need a specific feature. Whether you're doing CAD or video editing or you're doing Photoshop, all of these things, generally speaking, require a fairly beefy PC. And Chromebooks kind of feel like this middle stepchild, which is an unfortunate thing to be both the middle and the stepchild, but it's a little bit of a harder thing to justify. I'm sorry, did I just offend middle stepchildren?
I think you did.
I mean, it's okay. You can be a middle stepchild and still be loved. You can be ginger and still be loved, so I don't see why not. This is where your specific use case really matters. If you're spending all day long writing like Google Docs and watching YouTube, then a sub $400 Chromebook is a pretty solid pickup. However, for a lot of other people, I would argue that something like a base iPad actually can do a lot of the same things, in some cases can do even more. And of course, if you need to do anything more intensive, then you're pretty much going to have to go straight to a Mac or a PC. And that's where the sales pitch and the whole idea of picking up something especially as expensive as the Pixelbook starts to fall apart. The thing is, we don't live in a vacuum, and it's not 2011 anymore. While that first CR48 showed a lot of promise, Windows has absolutely filled a lot of the void that Chromebooks started to pick up in those early days. I mean, when Chromebooks first came out, one of the major advantages, and even to this day, has been in the price category. Put simply, you could get a very, very cheap Chromebook because all it needs to do is run a web browser. Nowadays though, Windows 10 laptops have actually come down a lot in price, and while a lot of the laptops have pretty crappy hardware and not much in the way of screens or specs or anything, but the important thing is they're about the same price as a Chromebook, and generally speaking, of course, you're getting a full version of Windows as opposed to a more limited operating system in Chrome OS. There's certainly advantages here, but when you put it all together, while it's definitely going to be meant for some people, in large part, it doesn't feel like we're that far away from that 2011 vision, and the rest of the world has definitely grown up. Speaking of things that you can't do on a Chromebook, this video was actually part of an editing challenge between a Mac and a PC, and between Justine and Linus. And as of recording this, I have no idea who won and what actually was the edit that we used to post this video. So you can feel free to check that out over here. I'm actually very curious to see how this video came out. And if it sucks, you can blame them.
Justine will probably win though, because Final Cut's better.
Final Cut is better. Oh wait, no, I can't say. All right, goodbye. Thanks for editing my video. Hopefully it wasn't that long. And make sure to make me look good.